Hey
everybody, welcome back to the Sprint. This is Marz here. I'm here with my boys, Petey and Kyle. Say what's up, gents.
what's going on?
Yo, ready to rock.
Hey, today we're talking about the Black Superhero Paradox. Of course, we're going to have Kyle give us a bit more of an introduction on this, and then we'll delve into this topic. Kyle.
All right. The Black Superhero Paradox, as defined by the. Actually, are we just discussing it or are we going to be reacting to the video?
We're gonna react to the video, but yeah. So you don't have to give a big thing, but something little. Well, your thoughts why you wanted to do this?
Well, I came across I came across a couple of videos and they're discussing black superheroes and I think they both missed the mark in terms of where the focus should be. Not that they were bad videos, but just not quite hitting the bullseye. I mean, the paradox, at least in I'm understanding it, is that of course we want to see more, or we want to see black superheroes, but then when we see them, they're not rendered in a manner that we would find appealing. So it starts, they go as far back. Well, it went as far back as Will Eisner's The Spirit, maybe even some of the early issues of Captain Marvel in terms of the depiction of black characters, and then they go forward, from there to, of course, I think they skip over Black Panther altogether for the most part, but then they go to the 70s, and with a focus on how the characters are not represented in a very authentic and an endearing way in order that we get the public behind these characters. That's this particular video. I also saw another one where the guy said, "Well, hey, if we can get like 70, I think the page was like 76,000 people, and he said if we can get everybody here who supposedly likes Black Lightning, then Black Lightning wouldn't run for 6 issues as a limited series. He would be in continuous publication." So stuff like that, I think, and I'll speak more to it, misses the mark because what we're saying is, well, we're buying Black Lightning to support the character because the character's black. This would be the equivalent of me just, buying it because I like the emblem on whatever superhero shirt, and not because the book is good, the stories are good, the character is compelling or anything of that nature. So while I do think they make some good points, I do think as well they miss the mark in terms of where the focus should be. Because to be quite, I mean, you guys know my favorite character is Superman. I don't buy Superman because he's white or because his hair is black. I love the character, and that has to be the same thing for any black character as well.
All right. So here we go.
Go with what, Petey?
Urban Eye. Huh?
Oh,
Oh, you could go. All right. Hold on.
William Irvin Eisner was one of the earliest pioneers in the comic book industry, best known for his series The Spirit, which ran from 1940 to 1952. The Spirit was a major hit for its time. At its peak, The Spirit was syndicated in 20 American newspapers with a total circulation of 5 million copies. People loved this comic for its mix of crime drama, noir vibes, and mystery-filled stories. The Spirit and many other works by Eisner, like A Contract with God, made Eisner a household name. Alongside his help in the advancement of the comic book industry with introducing concepts like the graphic novel and aiding the next generation of cartoonists by teaching comic book courses at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. Eisner achieved so much in the comic book industry, so many awards, accolades, and celebrations. One of the highest awards you can attain in the comic book industry is named the Eisners, after the cartoonist, which is the Oscars for the comic book industry. But there's something Eisner also did that was really distasteful. Enter Ebony White. Ebony White was the Spirit's sidekick who was designed in a racist.
Why would I have to struggle through these damn ads?
Weird. Ugly manner that was a typical depiction of Black people in the Jim Crow era. Eisner gave Ebony over-exaggerated pink lips and large eyes, something you would see in blackface. Eisner also gave Ebony a very country minstrel show pattern of speech. Eisner tried to justify the way he drew this character by pretty much saying this was a trend of the time. But even back then, people understood this imagery of Black people was wrong. But Will still decided to draw this character in this way. I've seen others defend this character by saying things like, well, he was treated with respect throughout the comics and had a purpose and was not just played for some joke. Again, this
Cut
is
here, cut,
because racist caricature of
cut.
Why are
Lord.
you saying cut for?
And now I got to stop on this image or keep going. Okay, what's
Oh
up?
no,
Why
no,
the cut?
let's go a little further. We have to keep looking at that.
Man, let's find
Yeah, just get that image off the screen. We don't need a reminder.
Hold on.
I'm surprised. I'm the only one here. Like the cut.
At
All
any
right.
point, yeah, it's it's a tough one. So keep going. Yeah, what do you got? What are you gonna say?
No, because and you guys have heard me say this before. I'm not for judging 1938 or 1945 with the 2025 perspective. And Black people were not exclusive in terms of being caricatures, in terms of how they were portrayed in strips and in media. You would have saw this with Chinese, Japanese, even Norwegian. So it didn't matter if you were Caucasian or not. Everybody got this particular treatment. However, it was wrong across the board. That's number one. There is no defending it. Number two, and it was not so much that this was a thing of the times. It literally took a civil rights movement where people were like, oh, wait a minute, they weren't concerned, they were not concerned of how this reflected other people because it didn't affect their lives. The fact that a Black person is drawn, I mean, to be quite honest, drawn to look like some sort of simian in these particular images was not a concern. The concern was entertainment, the concern was comedy, and as long as it fulfilled that, no big deal. And when people are like, well, hey, is this how you see me? Is this how you would render me? Oh, no. Well, then why are you doing this? But the biggest thing for me is that, Will Eisner is Jewish. So Will Eisner has to know, as a Jew, about the caricatures, okay, that were done for Jewish people, and somehow wasn't able to make the connection between the propagandist caricatures that they would do with Jewish people. Okay, and with the Pesachs and the elongated nose, all of the things that they would do in terms of the caricatures, but somehow thought this was okay, which really shows you just how bad it was and how discordant it was in terms of the rendering. So there's no excuse for this. There's no at this particular time, because this was done across the board, and so long as it didn't necessarily affect that particular person, it was okay. The concern about the other person just wasn't there. So I did definitely want to speak to that, because there's no at the time, like, no, it was wrong. Full stop. End of story.
Well, in my opinion, I think at that time when they probably asked him about this and he was talking about it, they also was republishing the Spirit in, I think, Kitchen Sink comic books. So I think at the same time, it's like you say, it was just wrong to do. It's not like a retrospect. There's also people buying the Spirit comic books, getting to see the reprints of it, and it's not being a big issue of it.
What year was this? Because it's Kitchen Sink. What was this, like six? This is what year was this?
No, this is in the 80s. This is like 80.
Oh, okay.
Like going into 90. I think at that point, I mean, because Frank Miller, you had Steranko in the 60s doing stuff Eisner did, and then you had Frank Miller doing a lot of stuff Eisner did in the Spirit. So it was
because I have
to get that back, get into seeing that type of art. What's up?
no, I have some of those, because I have some of those reprints, but I mean, I'm a big Captain Marvel fan, and I have some of the they came out with these hardcover treatments, and you have to see how jarring it is to flip through Captain Marvel and out of nowhere you see Billy Batson in blackface.
Mm.
People don't know how jarring that is. They're like, what?
Yes.
And it's just like from out of left field at the end of the day. The characters that were created, and with Captain Marvel supposedly, but I mean, this would be the same argument with Ebony White, with Ebony White in the Spirit. Well, this was supposed to be, it came from a good place, and you're like, where? This is terrible from start to finish.
Mm-hmm.
It looks nothing like a Black person. Okay, it looks nothing like a Black person. It's a caricature. And the biggest way to see that is you can look at how the Spirit is drawn. You can look at how the other characters are drawn. You can look at how, and say Captain Marvel would be drawn, and then look at Ebony White. Ebony White doesn't look human.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ebony White looks like some sort of creature, anthropomorphic, humanoid, but he doesn't look like a human being. That's the big thing that makes the whole thing wrong in terms of the caricatures. I mean, it's something different if somebody wants to do a caricature of you and they accentuate your ears, or if you got curly hair, they give you like this really, big, bushy afro at the end of the day. With which I think is fair game in terms of a caricature. But the moment that you make somebody look subhuman, that is where that's where you've already ventured into it just being wrong, and that's where I mean, when you look at some of these things, it literally, if they did not tell you any different, you know what? I won't even say that. It was wrong. It was wrong. It was wrong.
Well, I think for me, at the same time, you have to remember that it goes into a different discussion. And the discussion is of that period of, cartoons and movies, all the negative depictions is, what was how the people wanted to see and how they were, and how the media was portraying us also. So it gets into a bigger thing. I can't hold it against Will Eisner unless I'm going to it and saying, hey, this doesn't work for me at all. And at the same time, when I went to, possibly purchase the artist edition and I saw the proofs and I started seeing the great art, and then I saw Ebony, and then it was just like a shutdown. And it was just like, I got umpteen artist edition here. And I was like, I can't do it, even if I want to see that type, all of the techniques that he built in so many artists pulled from. Basically, his ability to put, lettering and design with the artwork, making it work as one, seeing how many ways he could have done that. And it's just like, I can't do the Ebony. Now, that's the other thing is like, I think Darwin Cook has also, fixed Ebony for the present day. But the hard part is you can't really go back and be like, you're going to run into it. It's just like when, I was in school and we watched Birth of a Nation, and Birth of a Nation is something that has so many techniques that was used in Star Wars and movies and the approach to storytelling, even though it was, the president said it was history written with lightning. That sort of storytelling is sort of taking history and like kind of dramatizing it in the way, or even stilted, trying to take that sort of thing. That is kind of those techniques are still in play, but when they show it to people, or it could, and white people too, people just walk out of the classroom when they're playing Birth of a Nation. It's just like, like most, or if not all the class just walk out, even with the teacher giving a disclaimer. Is like very bad, but you'll see the earliest forms of all these techniques. So trying, it's, if we're doing something, I think it goes in the organic thing of how the negative portrayal was in there. The hard part is you can go to, if you want to tear down people, then you're going to just be pulling out, we have Simon and Kirby. They have a character early on in the Young Allies. It's like, yes, it's definitely what Cal was saying, how of the time, but it's hard to kind of take him and say, we're going to put it on his back forever, because he, as a creator, he's done so much otherwise. So,
I'll get to that later. Marz?
I mean, one of many minds of this whole situation, I'm just not sure in terms of the whole paradox how this thing really can work. We, in this day and age, I think it's a question of who's doing this, right? If we're talking about this video alone, the one that we talked about before, Will Eisner, the people who are doing it are rather young. Am I correct?
You mean the video people making the video, who made this video?
Yeah.
I'm guessing.
And so I'm guessing because of that, they don't have enough knowledge of the whole thing. So this is a big surprise that comes to them. And so when they start going through all this stuff and saying, hey, what's going on? It's like, if you're first brought into this, is going to cause that type of shock. But otherwise, I mean, someone like Cal, who's been involved in this a long time, is just not enough. What we really want to see is good characters and good stories. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And of course, not making us look like fools, right?
Yeah.
And I think there has to be, that's the paradox. And this goes with everything, every type of writing, right? How do you make great characters with a great story? But why does it always have to be that characters who have an ethnic background tend to take a short, short grab of the stick or whatever it is?
But short end of the stick,
right?
Yeah, short end of the stick, yeah.
Short end of the stick. So what do we do? And in here, I think it's just starting off on focusing on Will Eisner is a problem. I think there's a lot of issues on it's a faulty. Yes, did these images occur before in the past by Will Eisner? Yes, it was a time. Do we accept it? No, because there was always some way, always someone who said, "Like, I'm doing this video." Are you trying to just stir things up, or are you trying to get to the root of the character, of the issue with the character, and why those characters are not being taken? I hope that helps.
Yeah, it's I think, and I don't think it's covered in this video, but I think one of the comic companies that did the most as far as branching out, not just as far as what they did. I mean, they didn't change everything, but they did a lot of different EC. They did Mad, they did science fiction, they did horror. They got in trouble for doing horror, but at the same time, in one of their sci-fi stories, they have a astronaut in a mask, and he's going about this in space, and at the end is a big reveal, and it's a black character, and it's not a caricature of a black character, it's just a regular black character in a mask. And it was like revolutionary for the time, and I think they probably had some struggles, but it was like not a caricature, but you have this one out of all of the comic industry stuff. So it's like, it's a I don't think you see until, like, I guess the Black Panther, where you really see, and I think like maybe a little before that with what was it, Gabe from the
Ian Jones?
yeah, Gabe from the Sergeant Fury, and then Bill Foster in the Avengers as Hank's Pym assistant, and then the Black Panther. But those are like supporting characters. So, but
Well,
you get the regular sort of faces.
yeah. Well, I think I would also call back to Easy Company with Jackie Johnson.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, where you definitely get. I mean, it gets better. I guess the thing is, it gets better once you look at the person as a human being. All of
Yeah.
a sudden, the person has a face, and actual human features, as opposed to the caricature, which is this with these it's hard for me to even like utter it out of my mouth, the description, because it's so bad. But once you look at it, like, oh no, these would be common features. These would be common features of someone who's black, and now let me give this character particular features, as opposed to this boilerplate mockery that you do right there. But yeah, I agree in terms of, if you're depending on age, you may not necessarily have the information. And I'm not looking to like just totally slate Will Eisner either.
Yeah.
While I think this is a big mistake, I do agree that, without a doubt, Will Eisner, comic great, did some really good stuff, which is why it's hard for me to look at this and, see how, this was such a complete and utter fail on his part, when he's, contract with God. Great stuff. Great stuff at the end of the day. But, how could you get it so wrong here is, probably where I have that particular conflict.
All right, we're gonna try to get through the rest of this.
Yeah, it's going to be a
Again,
slog.
this is just a cop out, because this racist caricature of this black boy character was wrong and had long lasting implications. Remember, this comic was ran through 20 newspapers all over the United States. Millions of people may have seen this character and probably didn't even read the comic, but just saw his face and may have laughed. This face has been seen by millions of people, and it was normalized. Pretty interesting that Eisner decided to create such a character that represented all the negative stereotypes of black people when he himself grew up fighting and was being bullied for his Jewish heritage. Imagine how these depictions made the black readers of these comics feel.
We would look at these other characters and sort of be ashamed, because that's all we would see of ourselves. That was the representations that we had. There was nothing to aspire to.
After a while, you're saying, why isn't the hero African American?
Sadly, Eisner was not the only person who drew black people this way, nor was his comic the only one to do this.
Now, in the early years of the comics industry, The Spirit, for example, I'm going to give some examples. Sunday newspaper supplement introduced the title character's black sidekick, the taxi driver, Ebony White. Dell Comics. The New Funnies featured the antics of Little 8-Ball alongside Raggedy Ann and Andy. Jungle comics were another popular genre, very popular, and Captain Marvel's black valet and sidekick Steamboat was another fixture in this popular comic book series until 1945. And so,
what do you want to say?
See, this is heartbreaking when I saw this the first time. All right, look at the way Captain Marvel is depicted, and then look at the sidekick. And this guy was created, I forget his name, but he was created and it was supposed to be a good thing.
Mm.
He was created. Look at his outfit. His outfit,
Tattered and pajamas.
he's in pajamas with a torn shirt for a cape. It's a joke.
Yeah.
It's a joke. And then you have to say, well, why is this funny? This is why, and again, still big Captain Marvel fan. I still have all the books, but you do find yourself avoiding this particular issue. Like, maybe I won't reread this one at the end of the day. But this is the stuff that, is very hard to, well, there's no justification for it. And if you are looking back historically in a time period where the country that is still has segregation on the books at the end of the day, you can definitely find explanation, but it's just bad. It just looks terrible. And even here, they're being, this much I will say, they're still being selective about the images that they want to show. They do want to show the worst possible images at the end of the day to make their point, but even the best images don't look great.
Yeah. Good Lord.
Images are horrible. I mean, yeah, I agree 100%. I don't think this. If we did this with any other media too, you would find the exact same things, in their depiction of African Americans, Asians, in a particular light, in this particular time period, right?
Right.
I'm not saying it's not right at all, and I think it was a whole societal thing at the time. It almost to the point where it reminds me of where they say, hey, when they started banning people smoking inside the offices, like, why? There's no problem with that, but there is a problem. And now people can't even think of people smoking inside offices anymore, or because it's
I'll do you one better.
just something you just don't do.
I'll do you one better, because if you go back, this is still, you could maybe not quite, but this would have been across the board. So if it was a Native American, if it was somebody Black, you would have found these caricatures for just about every group. But there was an image of like people from different parts of the world, like from India, UK, you name it, different places, and everybody was depicted. So pretty much in clothing, so on and so forth. And then if you look in the corner, there's like a swamp, like a bog, and there's this creature with its head coming up out of the bog, and that was supposed to depict the Irish.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was not limited to one race. It was not limited to one particular group. Okay, that is something, and I'm glad Marz brings it up, because that is something to keep in mind. This was not something where, hey, it was this unified look strictly at Black people. It was across the board, and the underlining thing. Sorry.
I was agreeing with you. I said,
Yeah. No, it was across the board. But the underlining thing, however, is always, well, this was for entertainment. And, the other thing is it's not me. So if I'm white and I'm reading these particular papers where I'm not going to be depicted in that manner, or I'm not part of this particular ethnic group of white people, then it's fine. It's just for giggles. I'm not going to pay too much attention to it. But, that kind of blinders approach is why it was so widespread.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Continue, P.
No, that's the thing where you have even historical things like in film, the Jazz Singer, which is the first talking picture movie or motion picture, and you can't utilize it as a historical piece because Al Jolson is in blackface the entire movie, singing minstrels type songs. So it's like this sort of form of history is just stuff that we don't, you don't go back to. If you're going to do a expose of what it was in the past, that would be one thing. But it's not like you can go back to it. The film history is kind of said we can't do any of this stuff. Same with cartoons. They cut, they've been showing Bugs Bunny for years. They cut all the racist stuff from that. Mickey Mouse definitely. Let's get all of that stuff out of there. Daffy Duck was any of that stuff. They nipped all of that stuff as much as you can because you just can't show it. But that's the other thing is like representatives say, hey, we're gonna pull Blue Eisner here, and it's like, in the retrospective, they're not necessarily present day showing you Ebony as he was presented or the Captain Marvel character, and even reading some of that dialogue. Good Lord. So it's tough. Let's see. all we can get on this thing. Ready, set.
These
But
images,
Petey,
I think
Petey,
about one of my
Oh, sorry. What's up? What's up?
increase the speed. I mean, we're at this rate, we're going to be doing this for hours. So let's
Okay.
increase the speed of the video.
Give me a sec. Let's see. Settings. Get the quality. Playback speed. What are we on? 1.5? You're gonna say
I'm
175.
good with that.
1.5? All right, cool. Ready, set, and let's go.
Quotes by writer Charles Johnson, who's also a cartoonist, who cautions us. He says, "We should remember that the pictures we are looking at, these era images of Blacks, are a testament to the failure of the imagination and often of empathy too, and tell us nothing about Black people, but everything about what white audiences approved and felt comfortable with in pop culture until the 1950s.
Eisner and many other comic book artists' drawings of Black characters most likely influenced many comic artists that come up after them, like a Robert Crumb, to also draw Black characters in the same way, and may have influenced some of your favorite mangaka to do so as well. Robert Crumb is, in my opinion, one of the craziest comic book artists to come out. A great artist, yes, but his ideas and stories are something an edgelord team would create. When Crumb gets called out for his horrible depictions of not just Black people, but of women and Jewish people as well, he justified by saying people just don't understand the message. Like, come on, man. Look at these pictures. This video isn't about shitting on Will Eisner, who's been dead for over 20 years. This video is about Black superheroes. I want to talk about Ebony White to show this is where we started as Black people in comics. How Black characters in comics started out as lowly racist, Black face sidekicks to being some of the best-selling characters out, recognized and respected by so many people around the world. Black superhero paradox is the concept of what it is to be a superhero while being Black. How these characters are supposed to be represented in ways that lean towards appreciation of Black culture and not appropriation. The idea of balancing how to tackle issues related in the Black community whilst not isolating other communities. Some ask, do we need to always use Black heroes to touch on social issues? Others may also ask, why do we need to worry about these ideals of others when they never cared about our own? The paradox doesn't just apply to these characters, but those who create, write, or draw them. Doesn't matter if the creator or writer of these comics and characters are Black or not. Do these creators need to compromise their vision again in order to appeal to the masses? I'm going to try and answer these questions more in this video. Let's start with a bit of history. Mainstream comics like Marvel and DC didn't present real Black superheroes till the 60s and 70s, with characters like Luke Cage, Black Lightning, and Black Panther being the most popular, all of which were created by white men. Luke Cage being created to take advantage of Blaxploitation movies of the 70s, Black Lightning created in order to compete with Marvel's Luke Cage. Both again were caricatures of
Hey,
Black
can we take a
people.
pause here?
Yep. What up?
No, that was that was a bit quick. I should have probably asked for a pause a little bit earlier. Again, and I think we've said this already, the idea that this was something that was appropriate for white audiences, depending on the group, had no problem, with the same type of caricatures of, other groups of white people. He already stated that. But he's making you had other Black characters. You had other Black characters that were given much better treatment before superheroes. You have to remember that the whole superhero craze dies down after World War II. World War II ends, superhero craze dies down. What comes out later on is going to be monsters and war comics. Monsters and war comics are going to get there, and science fiction comics as well. There's that classic EC story from EC Comics. It's a classic. I can't remember the issue, but classic story, and the lead character's Black, well before any of the other things that would be coming down the pike right here. I already mentioned Jackie Johnson, who's a member of Easy Company. Okay, and you did have some other characters sprinkled around. So the whole idea of superheroes, you have to remember, superheroes weren't in vogue again until showcase number 4 with Flash. If it wasn't Superman, if it wasn't Batman, if it wasn't Wonder Woman, for the most part, superhero comics were just, they just weren't what they were during that golden age boom, coming in the golden age of comic books. So that's one. And then 2, the idea that there's something wrong with Luke Cage, Black Lightning being created by white, creators. Well, that's a difficulty since the overwhelming number of creators were white. So if they're not creating them, we don't get these characters. That's
I totally agree, and I don't want to fault the Marvel creators because they were white guys creating Black people. And, the fact that these characters were first showing up, I was interested in seeing those characters. And, when the Falcon shows up, obviously the Black, but that's the thing, when we get to the rest part of this video, they're going to be having a description of it. Obviously, slowly the Black talent starts to come into the comic books. And one of the artists who works on it is a black artist. So, and was it Billy Graham? So it's like,
On Luke Cage?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Billy Graham, who has a really, if you follow his history, he has a really great history in career in comics, inside and out of comics.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's the thing of having where you have most businesses, especially in entertainment, being, run by white people and having mostly white people. So now faulting them to saying there's no good black characters and then say, hey, now they're interested in black characters, but they're by white people. Like, well, yeah, we know that. We know that they were
Yeah,
by,
so's Black Panther, and I mean, amongst the three of us, does anyone here not like Luke Cage or Black Lightning? Anybody not like these characters? Any issue with them?
I will say no. I've more met Black
Yes,
Lightning.
there is an issue. There is an issue.
Okay.
Oh,
So no, and I think he brings it up right there in the video. I think yes, no one has these characters were adopted and they were made by these major companies for black, black people, and they were definitely adopted as representatives, Luke Cage and Black Panther. But you always have the issue where the black characters, where he said, always have to do these social they have to go and do these. Oh, we got to fight against drugs. We got to fight against poverty. We got, I'm trying to say, as opposed to just a story on pure action. It's always an extra thing with black characters every time they have to do it. Whenever you have that with Luke Cage and both Black Lightning, both had to address issues that were going on or that were part of the overall black community. And don't get me wrong, but it's always a constant theme. They're always going over it, as opposed to, hey, you never have a character like the Fantastic Four worrying about how, about the poverty and or Captain America. They're fighting the evil guys and beating them and getting out. I think that is the issue I've had with them. You know,
Did
I
they
I love
agree.
the characters.
only deal with some black
You
subject
disagree?
matter?
No, I'd agree because this is something, and it's something that I've probably said in previous video where you want, I don't want to buy this character because they're black or anything else. I really would like to buy this because I enjoy the stories and that's really endeared me to the character. You know, I'm not a, I'm not a fan of Black. I'm really not a fan of Black Panther because he's an African king. I just really enjoyed the character and vibe with him from early on, and then it just went from there because there's a bunch of black characters, and I never connected with them in the manner that I connected with, say, the Black Panther or Luke Cage, Black Lightning, and I know they're going to get a little bit. I know they'll get a little bit more into it at the end of the day. But what Marz is saying is, I really would rather just read like some really great adventures at the end of the day, as opposed to, yeah, we got to have what was that movie? Don't drink your juice in the hood. We got to have the message.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What's the message here? What's the message there? Because then it's again, then this is not so much of a character for entertainment. This is more like a political tool or a social tool, and that's not fair.
Well,
This character should just be able to have some adventures, be a superhero.
well,
Yes.
I would say that Luke Cage, obviously looking at the covers here and you see definitely Black Lightning. But I would go looking at, other characters, and I know as we go towards the future, it became more and more of that. But with the Black Panther, like having adversaries like Killmonger and some of the other, was it Venom and that sort of thing, having these type of villains. It was trying, then more so with Kirby where it became just an adventure strip type of deal. You have certain things where they will have regular stories. I think more as you go along. I think Black Goliath? He's fighting Stiltman. So in those characters, they did, when I saw, I think it was Giant Man when he was in was he no, he was Black Goliath, and then Thing says he said that Goliath was a bad guy, so he goes as Giant Man. And then, but being a scientist, the problem is that they run out of steam. It's like, oh, he's having some issues, and then they take away Black Goliath's power. And I'm like, yo, what's going on? Why? They also, not to stay on black, they also, destroyed Jocasta. So I'm like, why? But anyway, in the 2-in-1 thing. So there, I mean, there is definitely a slant going. I mean, obviously with Luke Cage, well, kind of go towards the black exploitation type of subject matter, but they still have him, I guess, going against like Doctor Doom and some Moses Magnum and some other things. But yeah, you do kind of lean towards that sort of subject matter. But then there is options with like the Black Panther where they kind of go to the superhero fair. So I just wanted to add that in.
And one thing I want to add is about, and you're right, Petey, about some of that stuff, not some, all of it, but it's also that it seems that it's always black characters in TV shows and even in the rap scene where the rap guys always have to come out with an album or a single talking about, hey, don't do drugs or stay in school or don't wear the different colors, stuff like that. And you're like,
they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, well, they've cut down that considerably, and I definitely mainstreamed a lot. But I'm saying that was always one of the things back then. I think that there's been a maturity in the comics now where they're handling different topics differently. I mean, hell, we had Black Panther in Intergalactic Empire of Black Panther, so where they talked about where the Black Panthers were out in space, which was a completely different take on it. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. You know what I'm trying to say? Whether you agree that how they got there was okay, it's still like, okay, we're not tackling the same old crap, right? So that's all I wanted to say.
And I also add, I forget the movie, but there's certain characters like I know Luke Cage, there's a movie with Jim Brown where he has kind of a yellow top and a leather jacket and like dark pants. That's very similar to the style. It looks like they saw that, they got a good face, and then they're like, let's add some comic book stuff with the chain and the armbands and the headband, the metal headband. So it's like they're looking through, and there's a lot of other characters like I think Neil Adams and doing John Stewart, where they were getting these interesting looking faces. John Buscema also did in the Silver Surfer, and they're giving you these realistic looks for how black people look. So it was, yes, subject matter at time, but I think the sort of the approach of what they were doing was better. Now you look at it, and obviously Luke Cage's outfit is dated, but it's like for the time. And the same like Black Lightning, there was I don't know if the movie with Richard Roundtree where
that was it.
That came first, but it's like very similar to that. So it's like bang, bang. It's like you got a shorthand, and you see that same thing with the who's it, like Nick Fury present day, and then we get Sam Jackson as it. So there's some real life things where they were drawn from looking at a movie and saying, hey, we should do this. Or I don't know if they saw DC and went the other way, but you have something that has some similarities to what we can see in film. But it's a step, looking at it, it is a step forward. I understand isn't by white people, but at the same time, and the thing of the black exploitation, which was started with Melvin Van Peebles, that's him doing stuff on a shoestring budget, making a film, and then the audience saying, yeah, we want to see this. Then Hollywood saying, yes, we have to do this. And then we also get Gordon Parks, who does Shaft, and then we get his son, who does Superfly. So you had, and then the Hammer, who starts doing his own film. But of course, Hollywood didn't let it go. But it's getting better, and the looks of the characters are better. It's just written by white people, which they're going to be talking about a lot now.
And speech patterns. Black Lightning.
Unless anyone has anything else to say. We good? So we got through 6 minutes. Ready, set, go.
The origin of the black superheroes only having lightning powers trope. Even though there are many black superheroes.
We already talked about that.
Lastly, Black Panther being created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, both who stated their main reasons for creating the character being they wanted to see more black characters in their comics and had nothing to do with the civil rights movement at the time, nor is associated with the Black Panther Party that was beginning to gain popularity around the time as well. Black Panther technically being the actual first black superhero, this first appearance being in July 1996 in an issue of Fantastic Four. All three of these characters came and went, having comic series being announced and usually due to low sales being canceled. These characters are often featured in other teams' comics like The Avengers, Justice League of America, Fantastic Four, and such. I personally can't speak on how Black fans felt about these characters at the time. I know many people did not connect with Black Panther because of his Prince status, him being from...
I connected with him because of his Prince status, that he was one of the smartest guys in the room. The bigger part is that in the not the first story, the second story, where you have, T'Chaka holding up T'Challa as a kid, and that father-son moment, and he's in tribal outfits holding up his son, and then Claude comes in and kills T'Chaka, and then T'Challa picks up the weapon that was used against his people and took it out on Claw and ran them out of there, then created his own technological jungle in Wakanda and all of the stuff in there. How can you not, what's it, 53? How can you not like connect with all of that stuff? And he's fighting the Sonic. They had a Sonic Panther, and Black Panther's fighting against it. It's like, how can you not like? He looks like Sidney Poitier in the comic books. Nobody agrees. I'm all alone here.
You got the floor.
Don't leave me hanging. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I connected with him when I bought it. It was like, I can't get the first appearance. I said, but let me, the cover of the second appearance, you don't even know what's going on. You just have the characters on the side and this energy coming out of the issue. And I just said, well, I got enough money to buy this. And I think I bought Fantastic Four 46, which had Black Bolt on the cover. And I brought those home, and I was just like, I think I still have it, but no cover to the 53. And I read it so much, and the interaction between the Thing and Black Panther. And said, so why did you attack us? And he tells his long story, and the Fantastic Four has their moments with them, and him becoming a big part of the Fantastic Four up until they decided to switch him over to the Avengers. So I was, when I got to see the Black Panther, and that's the thing, to see that issue, and before that, it's the Black Panther where he's fighting the Klan. I think every Black person had that comic book as a kid, and it's just like they came on the cross, and it's like, well, okay, yeah, this is what he's supposed to be doing. He's out there killing. That's by, the thing is, you have a white writer and a Black artist, Billy Graham, doing that. So, and Billy Graham with Bob McLeod, so it's a really clean artwork. So, all right, let's keep going.
Africa and the fantastical land of Wakanda, and the caricature nature of Cage and Black Lightning also didn't stick either because it didn't seem real.
In the beginning, I embraced it and I bought all of the issues, but I was finding it hard to read. Some of the characters struck me as being stereotypical and sort of making fun.
I mean, I love Luke Cage, and my cousins and I would sit down and we would read Luke Cage, and we would laugh, and we would go, nobody talks like this.
As time went on, these
All
characters...
right, I'm going to add this also. If you're a kid,
Yeah, I'll chime in after you.
when a kid reading Spider-Man and us reading Spider-Man as kids, totally makes sense. If you were a teen, as in Walter Simonson, even though he liked Spider-Man, the dialogue didn't jive with what was going on at the time when he was a teen. So he was like looking at, oh, here's another corny moment. Like Tiger, you hit the jackpot. What the, as a teen, you're doing that. But as a kid, it's like you're connected. Now, the same thing with Luke Cage as writing. I think he was in Spider-Man Team Up, and he has a scene where he's at a disco and he's like, this joint is jumping. And I'm pretty sure we had a ton of laughs, but his arc in the story, he saves Spider-Man, they have a good interaction. And it's like, I remember them having the fight, and I was like, I don't understand why they're fighting. Spider-Man wanted money in his first story. Why is he got this issue with Luke being a hero for hire? I want to get into something else, but you go.
I remember reading these stories, and if they were trying to do colloquialisms or like contemporary slang, I don't ever remember them getting it right, because it's very hard to get that right, because by the time they realize, oh, this is cool, especially with kids, we've moved on to something else. Yeah. One of the few times I remember them there was this tune that was really popular, and it was an issue of G.I. Joe. And this is the issue where it's like Snake Eye's origin, and Snake Eye's chasing Storm Shadow throughout New York City. And they actually had the lyrics from this song that was really popular in the comic. And I remember that was buzzed because everybody, oh, wow, they actually had that in the comic book. It was one of the only times I've ever remembered them being able to get that type of contemporary stuff into the book, because usually the time it fell flat. But if everybody was saying bad, by the time I got into the comic book, bad was no longer the term. So that's not that for me was never an issue. I never remember sitting down, however, and saying, these guys, the way that they're speaking is not the way that we speak. I wouldn't expect them to speak like us. It's a comic book. But the other thing is the depiction they have there of Black Mariah, which is very much in line with the way the characters were black, white. Otherwise, the villains could look any which, way at the end of the day. So, it. I think the best judge is to read those comics. And if you're going to say that Luke Cage spoke in a way that, you didn't think was real, if everybody's speaking like Luke Cage, that's one thing. But if you read the comic, you realize that Luke Cage spoke that way. Everybody else didn't speak like Luke Cage. Did Luke Cage, was Luke Cage fashioned in the same manner as, say, like a Black Mariah character? Or were the heroes, rugged, dashing? Were the women beautiful, and then the villainous women, looking like that? Then that would be, pretty much in like a Hollywood format of where the good people are going to look great, and the bad people are going to look hideous, overweight, all of that other type of stuff. And I don't think you should read. I don't think more than that should be read into it unless it's like overt, without having to go back to the Eisner stuff. It's just overt. Okay, it's pretty obvious what's going on here.
And more.
They didn't value, and it really comes down to two things. They didn't value the audience, right? They didn't value the black audience, or they didn't think that the audience was a significant audience. And you have inside these not factories, but these artist rooms and drawing, there were no other black characters for them to connect with, to see. And so they felt free to do this and say, hey, we're getting sales, or it's not causing any harms, right? But when you have characters like Black Panther, here you have writers and artists who are trying to do the right thing, right? And so, like you said, people connected with those characters, even though they're written by white people, not because they they wanted to see themselves represented, but some of them were good characters and some good stories, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The only other thing I would say, talking about the failure of the series, we see with you have to remember there's a period in time in comic books where comic books were either 8 times a year or 6 times a year. And even though the time of the 70s, which we're getting into, the end of the 60s, and Marvel was just released to be able to put out more superheroes, then they started this influx of a bunch of characters that didn't do well. Same with DC. They introduced a bunch of characters by big name talents, and they didn't do well. It just isn't just the black characters not connecting. And the other thing is that I looked at it before we did this, the Black Panthers Jungle Action series was, either 6 to 8 times a year. Same with the Kirby's series. Now, Kirby was having struggle with sales also. So we don't have a true test of whether this would work, because not only did those books struggle, the X-Men struggled, Iron Fist struggled. They put Iron Fist and Power Man and Iron Fist together, and that was a successful comic book up until you have up until it's like 125, I think they got to. So you had a book that went from the 70s into the 80s. So you had a thing that had a decent, wasn't the standing of the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, but once you got to a monthly status with the Power Man and Iron Fist, it was success. The same thing with the X-Men, which was almost canceled around issue 107. And then when it went monthly, it caught on. So the thing of the period of the time, we don't have a true test of would all these books be successful or not, because we needed books. Because at the same time, Superman is struggling, because some of their titles were Jimmy Olsen, I think Superman, were either 6 to 8 times a year. And you could see the sales, and you don't see them deciding what Marvel was doing with all their key titles were monthly. So you have to factor in DC and Marvel trying to do it. Point from in the 80s, there was only one bi-monthly title, which was Doctor Strange, and it was struggling. It didn't, and they didn't get that monthly until, I don't even think they ever got it monthly. So you have to factor that in. It's not just the black characters didn't connect because of this. There are many titles by many. Kirby, that's the New Gods, that, the sales weren't the numbers of the Fantastic Four. So you have to factor that in. You just can't just throw black characters didn't connect, and they didn't like him because he was a what's the name? The period of the time, there's Omega, the Unknown. There's so many characters that didn't work out in the 70s. They thought comics were going to end in the 70s. So, all right, keep doing.
Characters got their just due, with many of them being overhauled and rewritten with more depth and relatable factors added to them, starting with writers like Christopher Priest taking over Black Panther and turning the character into the character we know today. Later on in the early to mid-2000s, Reginald Hudlin took over Black Panther as well, and his run of Black Panther has been met with such high praise. Storm was also a popular, prominent Black character, being a staple of X-Men comics. The problem in my eyes with these characters is that they were written through the lens of white writers, especially early on, so there was a real lack of connection to what it was like being Black in this world during the time when these heroes were created. I personally don't think it's an issue for white writers to work on Black characters, but there will be subtle nuances that can be overlooked or be lost when a white or non-Black person writes these characters. Something as little as most of these characters having the same haircuts. Most white writers or artists who aren't deeply in community with Black people wouldn't be able to, or maybe even care to think about those things like the differences between a taper fade, a blast fade, or bald fade. And we saw this with all the aforementioned characters, with most of them having the same 3 haircuts. These are common characters that you'll find in comic books in the late 80s.
This guy is going to be off base. That other statement was off base, and this
forget
is
him.
off base.
Forget him. See, I was waiting too because they already jumped from Luke Cage and Black Lightning, and now we're in the 90s with the milestone stuff. And they told, I mean, maybe I doubt they're going to go back to it, but they totally, that's why I didn't want to chime in on Panther's Rage. That's my introduction to the Black Panther, Panther's Rage. With, and there's something to be said for the stewardship of a character. Okay. The majority of characters don't come hot out of the gate. And if they do come hot out of the gate, they don't last hot out of the gate. You had characters like Wolverine, Punisher. It took over a decade for these guys to find their footing. You even had characters that were popular and, didn't really hit the public consciousness for decades. So you look at a character like the Black Panther who appears in Fantastic Four, and the Black Panther doesn't have a #1 selling book until the year the film came out. What was that, 2015? Okay, so you're looking at a character introduced in the Silver Age in the 60s, but the stewardship of the Black Panther is excellent. He is introduced in the Fantastic Four. He then becomes a supporting character in the Avengers. And by the time that I actually started reading, I was reading back issues of Panther's Rage. This was a great story. It was so compelling what he was going through in terms of how he was trying to keep the kingdom together and being challenged like never before in the form of this new villain, Killmonger. And, I was eating it up. I couldn't. And I was like, this is what got me reading this character. I was like, well, what happened? I wanted to go back and read the origin. I wanted to see if anything else was coming out. I'm really going, who was writing this? Must have been a Black guy writing this. Only a Black guy could come up with such compelling texture of an African nation and write an African king in this particular manner to keep him so regal and at the same time so moral. Must have been, no, it was Don McGregor. Wait.
No, I had that same reaction when I first saw the Todd McFarlane's art and looking at his babes and the ratio that he would give them, and I'll be like, yo, this guy, this guy, talking to a friend, this gotta be a Black guy, and it's definitely not. So I had the same reaction to that art. So keep going.
I'm being facetious because I really wasn't concerned who was writing it. And when I met Don McGregor, I was like, okay, I didn't have any expectations as to who the writer was, but I think that flies in the face of what was just said here, about writers who didn't know. No, you need a good writer. Okay, you need a good writer. Don McGregor actually, I had the chance to interview him years ago, but Don McGregor, they were saying, hey, look, nobody's going to buy this. We got to put some white people in the story. We have to put some white people in the story, to try to get them to come in. So Don McGregor was like, okay, he made villains. So all the villains were white. And they're like, no, come on. Don't do, come on, just put some more white people in there. He was like, all right. So who did he put in there? He put in the Ku Klux Klan. So that was it. But that storyline, was a complete storyline. And it's also fundamental for the Black Panther because it showed that, no, this guy can actually take center stage. He can be a leading man in a series and people will come out to read this. So after Panther's Rage, he gets another limited series. He gets a couple of limited series. After Panther's Rage, he gets his own series that Kirby started. Then we get a couple of limited series. Then he gets his own series again with Marvel Knights. That was the best series by far of anything that had been done. probably still is today. He gets the next one from Reginald Hudlin. But it was that series back there with Panther's Rage, written by Don McGregor, that pretty much cemented, no, this guy can be a leading man. We can continue to do this with his character. All right, so stewardship of a character, and you see it with other characters too, like Morbius, where Morbius has a series all the time. It'll be canceled. Okay, we get whatever we get, and then it'll be canceled. But there's stewardship of that character. They believe that there's value in this particular character. That was something that was done with the Black Panther, and that is something you should address. Because if it's going to be, well, these guys didn't understand, well, the stewardship of the Black Panther, all the way up to the point where this guy, who was a supporting character, becomes a lead character in his own series, has the #1 book, and has a movie that made over $1 billion. That's stewardship. And that does fly in the face of people who, like, we don't understand what the heck is going on. We don't really particularly care about this character, or we don't know what to do with them. So that is something you want to add in your video, because that does fly in the face of what's being said so far.
Yeah. So we get to this TED Talk in Toledo.
80s, early 90s. Now, all the characters in the comic books, they look somewhat like this. Either they're bald with a goatee, bald with an eye missing, right? So the middle one.
All right. He's talking about the 2000s, not the 90s. The 90s. And the hard part is talking about hair in comic books. Like, I think as far as the white characters, as far as the heroes, outside of hair color, the only thing I can remember of a different style is Barry Allen, which he had a buzz cut. And people to this day still
Green
have
Lantern. Saying Green Lantern.
No.
Guy Gardner?
No, the Flash.
Yeah.
The Barry Allen's first. I mean, that's more than the 80s. I'm talking about in the 60s. Like, he talking about, like, there wasn't, they talked about it earlier too, that no, like using that artist thing, no, the haircut thing, and say, here's all the different styles. Everyone besides, as far as the white collar, just had different color hair, and only, Barry Allen had a military cut. It's not till you get to later where you have, I guess you could say Neil Adams going for a larger afro with Jon Stewart, but that was the faces that they were giving these characters were nothing like you'd seen before. Like, you can complain about the hair, but like, I mean, come on, like the the Jon Stewart face was a great one. So, but these characters, this is 2000s. Like I already said, you had Power Man who looked like Jim Brown. Said Black Lightning, that could be more Richard Roundtree. You had basis for what you could do. Going to this period where they decided that since you had Jordan and a lot of black guys were shaving their head, they would do this. This was the go-to thing for Luke Cage. And we only had Rage. I think Rage was the one who was in the New Warriors. He was in the Avengers for 2 seconds. But Rage was a younger looking guy who was beefed up and that, and bald, or shaved his head. I think though, because of the accident he was in, he was bald, right? So then you had Luke Cage, and then they took away his hair for some strange reason when he had, a little bit shorter hair in the 90s. So he didn't look like Rage. You had these sort of things, but he's going to go off the cliff. Then you have but later on, it became more generic by trying to make everyone look cool and have a Michael Jordan type haircut. And then everyone became sort of the same with different builds and that sort of thing.
Hold that screen,
Yeah.
Because right there, the bald head and the goatee. Guys complaining about the bald head and the goatee. And with your indulgence, I'm going to use Marz as an example right over here. Ladies and gentlemen, the haircut that we see with Marz is nice, soft, well-groomed hair, okay? And this was very much the style that we saw with the Black Panther, okay? He had like a nice, well-groomed, smaller cut at the end of the day. However, when we got to Marvel Knights, Black Panther #1, when the Black Panther stepped out, he was now bald with a goatee. And I was like, I didn't like the change, but what flies in the face, I know I've said that before. What is So what stands out so much is that who was writing Black Panther? Yes, it was Christopher Priest,
Yes.
a
Yeah.
white man. I couldn't believe that a white man did this to the Black Panther. Oh, wait a second. Christopher Priest is black. Christopher Priest is black. So he decided he was going to change up T'Challa's look with what? A bald head and a goatee. Why? Because it was popular at the time. It looked cool. He wanted him to look different. Okay, he didn't necessarily want him to look like Onyx or anything of that nature, but okay, this was the style right here. So when I see this type of stuff, I hope the whole talk that he did introduced that portion as well. Because if not, we're paying attention to the wrong stuff. We're paying attention to the cosmetics. What was the hairstyle? What was this? What was that? No, what was the character? What were the stories?
Yes.
What were the stories?
Yeah.
I can understand if Luke Cage. That's the other thing too. You cannot say that Luke Cage. Maybe you can make the argument with Black Lightning. Definitely with Black Goliath. Terrible. Bad stuff. But with Luke Cage, with Black Lightning, you can't say that there was not good storytelling there in terms of these characters initially, and it didn't get worse because you look at the character of Black Lightning now. This is a guy who, much in the same vein of the Black Panther, because of the stewardship of this character, and there was a lot of legal stuff with him as well. But when he finally does get to television, he has a successful series for 4 seasons. So those are the things that you want to look at in terms of the overall thing with the character. Not, hey, look at these particular cosmetic things that they were doing. Oh, look, see, they were depicted with only 3 different hairstyles. To be quite honest, who cares if you were vibing with the character? Because most characters are not gonna. I mean, you know what? We're never gonna get through this video if I keep harping. Let's look at the character, not the cosmetic stuff.
Yeah.
There, that's Luke Cage, right? Or Rhodey, the War Machine and Iron Man. He looked like that in the comic books at one time. That's Nick Fury, of course, that we all see in the movies. But also there's a guy called Deathlock on Marvel. He had the eye missing. Cyborg on DC. He happens to have an eye missing and he happens to be bald, right? Oh.
All right. When Cyborg went through something, he was bald, but he got the hair back when he was almost vegetable, but he was going through something and been through. All right. The eye patch thing, the Nick Fury was a white character. So that's a different thing. So he just gained the eye patch because of that. You have you have Cyborg, who had a robotic eye, but so does the Bionic Man. And Deathlock was originally a white guy that's decayed, right? In the 80s, they decided to have Deathlock be a black guy, but at the same time, it's not, you can't just say it's a black trope or something like that, a comic book trope of, hey, look at this. This is what's going on here, because it's a thing of the cyborg, where the easiest way to say one eye is human, the other eye is robotic. That's a cyborg thing. It's not a black person thing. And Nick Fury got his because they wanted to pander to Hollywood, and they got it. They got exactly what they wanted. They got Sam Jackson. He was like, I can't wait. And, you already had the casting, someone that you could bank on, and they could say, yeah, we can see it, let's do it. So it's not exactly how he's describing it. He's trying to push the argument in a certain way, which I don't like.
But it gets better. John Stewart, Green Lantern, the Black Green Lantern, he has a bowl cut. Sometimes in the comic books, they get a little jazzy, put a little lightning bolt in there, right? And then what's really easy for illustrators to draw is a man with a ridiculously sized afro.
And now the new fan favorite, the dreadlock comb over. This is an overused hairstyle for black characters at this point. It was pretty much played out once Killmonger came out in Black Panther #1. So I don't know why it was used so much. Black women characters definitely don't get no love in the hairstyle department. So
this isn't over.
Why they use the hair? They think it looks cool.
Being black, but the race of the character does not really come into play or matter in the series. For example, Mark Miller's comic Prodigy, the main character, Edison Crane, who is just like a James Bond or a Bruce Wayne type of guy. He's a super genius, super rich, and is damn near perfect at everything that just happens to be black. Another example of this is when Bulletproof from Invincible takes over the mantle of said character and becomes the main character for a few issues. We get a great backstory of Bulletproof. Nothing about his race ever comes into play in that background, though, and that's fine. Those are good comments, and I believe there's room for these types of stories. Jordan Peele also did this in his 2019 movie Us, where this family, the Wilsons, are tormented by evil clones unto themselves called The Tethered. Again, a movie where the cast just happens to be black. There is a difference, though, with this movie compared to those comics, since it was written by Jordan Peele.
Whatever.
Peele wrote
Cut.
things to the movie
Cut.
a black writer would think about. Like,
What is he talking about? You got a house.
Wait a second. Hold on. And see, and this is
Connections are
purely
pretty
reaction.
tenuous.
This is not commentary. You know, I don't want to make anything personal, but how can you focus on Bulletproof from Invincible and, you know, this Prodigy storyline, and you didn't focus on Panther's Rage? Hey, Panther's Rage isn't not part of this video. How can you focus on that and not focus on Panther's Rage is considered to be the first graphic novel, you know, based on, you know, the format and the long length of the story. How does those are good stories? Okay, I'm not gonna contend against it, but how can you say, well, no, because it really makes it look like only the contemporary stuff is good, and anything that came to us past a certain date, especially if it's around the blaxploitation era, oh, that stuff, you know, no, that stuff was just bad. So it only started getting good at this point. No, you had good storylines. Okay, you had very good stuff. Did both of you guys read the final issue of Power Man and Iron Fist?
No, I didn't read that. No.
No.
It's just me. Oh man, the way that story ended, and the only reason why it resonated so much was because of the care that had been taken with both of the characters of Luke Cage and Danny Rand. At the end of it, Luke Cage is once again on the run. He's on the run. You know, he's actually being sought out as the killer of Danny Rand. So Luke is right back where he started. He's right back where he started from issue 1 of Luke Cage, Hero for Hire. Danny is presumed dead. Okay, Misty, finds him, and she's like, she understands he didn't do it. She's going to try to help him, and it just ends with a close-up of Luke, and he just says Christmas, and that's the last thing that he says. But when you read the whole thing, it's like, yeah, if you've been following the story, there's such care taken. There's such care taken with the storyline. And they got a double-sized last issue where a lot of the characters would have never, it would have just been like, well, we tried. That would have been the end of it. So you had really good stories before these other guys, and the fact that it's just glossed over, like we're just going to make this big, we're going to part the Red Sea and just run over, run right through to the other side. No, there was good stuff there too. Even in the time periods that you may not have liked, there was still good things going on, or else we wouldn't have these characters now.
But what they're saying, he's saying right now is the Invincible character, the characters in Us, they're not actually black characters. They're just characters that don't reference anything about the black culture.
I guess that begs the question, what is a black character then? If the character is a superhero and they have, good home life and they just want to go out and do good, is that a black character, or does a black character need to check certain boxes in order to be considered a black character?
That is the harder part. We were talking about it earlier as far as doing stories where it was referencing, doing superhero stories where we have, the thing is to save the public, right? That's the thing. So as the villain comes in here, the heroes are here to take care of that. And now they're going into the thing of saying, the thing of they're not black enough. They can't be sitting here walking around, driving around. Hey, work on your timing, and going home together as a family. There's nothing black about that. Like, what are they trying to say here? It's going left. Invincible, who took over, yeah, he was a good character, but I think they made a hard turn here.
Both of you guys watch Invincible?
I haven't watched. No,
I think
watched a couple of shows.
Huh?
I've watched some shows. Yeah.
Yeah, the characters have Viltrumite and I almost said half human, but in terms of human, you'd be half Korean. His ethnic background, it almost never comes into play. It almost never comes to play. There's never been an episode where they're celebrating, Lunar New Year or anything of that nature. I don't think it's ever come into play. Nobody cares. Mm-hmm. Nobody cares. He doesn't have to come out here and, well, hey, you know what? This guy over here, he should be representing the Asian community more. We don't see him doing this, that, and the. Nobody cares. The mother's not doing anything. Like, nobody cares. Everybody's totally with this character. Why? Because of the story, okay? Because of the characterization, because of the locales. That's why they're totally with the other stuff they don't care about. It's all cosmetic for the most part. So if we get that in the Invincible, because that'll probably happen on the Invincible show as well. But if you have Bulletproof coming in and he's able to just, go over here and do his own little stint as Invincible before Mark Grayson comes back, great. It means the guy can just be a human being and go about his life. Unless, of course, then we get to the social political things where, look, if you're going to be a Black character, you have to speak to these things because you have this particular platform. And then, yeah, you would get into, I don't know if it's so much of a paradox, but you would get into that particular conflict. But again, I don't see why it's a default thing for a Black character if you have another character that's also from a minority group and they can just go out and tell stories.
Well, also,
look, I see your point, and I agree mostly with it, but I'm not saying you shouldn't speak on it, at all. I'm just saying that the amount of the time to spend speaking on it is an issue, right? And that's a point. And so I mean, it doesn't hurt speaking on it here or there. And in terms of the Invincible thing with Mark being half Korean and stuff, I think the bigger issue is he's a Ultramite and the power that comes along with it. So, they're not saying, hey, man, he's over there being the standard bearer for Korea. You never get that, He's the standard bearer for the I wouldn't say the United States, but that's where he's based at, and that's the focus that he has. I never got the impression of anything like that. Huh?
Well, let me ask, I'll put this out to both of you. Has there been a storyline, comic book storyline, superhero storyline, that was a socio-political storyline with the Black character that you remember and it resonated with you?
I'm pretty sure there is. I had to think about it. I couldn't call it offhand.
Me too. There's a lot. There's a lot.
I think there's a way to do it. There's a way to do it that, especially in superhero comic books, you don't want to do like what we recently talked about with the Avengers and try to, do a Norman Lear type of thing with the, equal opportunity, in my opinion. But I had to go, think about it from the wall.
Yeah, me too. Nothing off the top of my head. I mean, the last one I thought was pretty good was Blood Hunt. Some people didn't like it. That was the crossover series in Marvel. You had Blade. You had a couple of who took a prominent thing versus the vampire. Thought that was interesting. But
and there was something like socio-political in the storyline.
No, no, not really socio-political, really. So no.
Yeah, that's what I'm driving at. Was there like an issue? There's a Black character. They're talking about, some socio-political issue that would directly affect Black people, and it's being expounded upon in this storyline through this particular superhero. Is there something like that you remember from comics and it resonated with you?
I would say
that. Well, I've seen him. So go, Petey.
No, I was just going to say that I was just thinking of, because they added this subplot to Storm that she was growing up in Harlem, and they had the moment where she goes back to where she grew up, and it's a tenement, and it's all, they have like a gang in there, and it's not a gang of Black people, it's a gang of it's a multicultural gang. And then next thing you know, she's equipped to stop them, but by someone she doesn't see cuts her, and next thing you know, she has this moment where she goes full on Storm, and then Luke Cage and Misty Knight come in and say, kind of leave the kind of the small stuff to us here, like, because it's a different way to handle these type of things, someone with your powers or that sort of thing. So we guess we'd have to that would be a whole nother show, but to get to the ones, I'm pretty sure there are some, but but it's a way to do it. So
it's not a hard way to do it. You're right. There's a way to do it. It's not a hard way to do it, and it's just doing it right. That's the key thing.
I've read
some recent I've read some recent comics that I've been a bit disappointed because I think they focus too much on the socio-economic, the social impact, and you're like, just tell the doggone story, bro. We don't have to go through the whole history of what happened and what didn't happen and stuff. Yes, every once in a while, okay, but every comic, and there's been several comics within the last couple of years where I tried to say, you know what, I just can't go. And I bought the comic, but it's like I can't. And if you're not having an enjoyable story, if there's always heavy social commentary, and I guess the writers, this is how they pitch and say, hey, this is what we have to say. This is what we need this to be addressed. But sometimes the story should just be fun. Christopher Priest is now doing Marvel Knights, the recent Marvel Knights comic that just came out, and the whole controversy over it. I don't know if you guys heard about it, right? About T'Challa's son, right?
What was this? No.
About T'Challa's son. So Christopher Priest, I mean, one of the things he's done is he's pushed back on only doing black characters. He did Deathstroke recently. He did was it Witchbane? I can't remember Witchblade. But I mean, he's like, I'm a writer, and as a writer, I want to write other things. I shouldn't be just put into he's only going to be doing the urban thing altogether. And that's exactly what we're saying. You need to have someone who can do other things and tell stories, and it can't be with always this huge social commentary on every single thing. I mean, yes, he did Black Panther, and then he felt that he was being typecast in a way. Like, this is all you can do. So now he did Marvel Knights, but there's a twist to it that he's doing. And you're like, oh, snap. How will people take this? And that's probably something we should probably explore.
Yeah.
It kind of touches on this, but,
What's the twist?
T'Challa's son is white.
Well,
Excuse me?
He adopted him?
Yeah. The issue just ends with him taking off his mask and showing he's white after he defeats his father.
All right. This is too much to get into. Let's keep going.
Sounds like my life.
So how far are we? We're gonna have to make this a
say.
part 2, 3, and 4 because
Do you want to?
Well, let's see. How far? Yeah. How much video is left?
We got 17 minutes.
Sounds like part 2 to me.
Let's just see. Hear this finish out, and then we'll stop there. All right.
Dad character, Gabe Wilson. Throughout the film, he's wearing a Howard sweater, Howard being one of the most popular HBCUs around. He also wrote Gabe in a way that subverts the big black man stereotype. Purposely, I might add. Gabe, played by Wilson Duke, a 6'5", probably 260, 280 black man, is someone in the film who comes off as dorkish and goofy. Spider-Verse movies are a perfect example of a non-black writer writing for a black character. This movie showed that Miles was a black or Afro-Latino character without overdoing it, showing his culture and who he was in a very subtle way. Either it was his fashion choices, the music he listens to, and even his bilingual greetings. Very appropriate, not feeding to stereotypes and not trying too hard to show his race, but also not completely ignoring it, making Miles into a real relatable character, far from what comic book writer Yehudi Macario did, who wrote the 4th issue of the What If Miles Morales Was This Hero miniseries, where we see what if Miles was Thor, and this comic is straight up horrible. The narration is in raps. Miles calls Asgard his hood. Miles is also designed to look like Odell Beckham Jr., and it's just a straight up cringe fest of a comic. Ricardo later apologized for a stereotypical depiction of this character after all the backlash he got from this comic. The editors of this story should also been called out for letting this be pushed through and printed. I don't understand what their thought process was. This is where the importance of having black creators comes in.
I can tell you what their thought process was. They thought it was cool. That's what they thought.
Black Panther, Black Lightning. Once they got black writers, the tones of these.
Let's cut here, right here, on that right there. Okay, look what this guy just did. He slated Odell Beckham Jr.
Was he rapping? Was it iambic pentameter? I just want to ask for a friend.
No, Odell Beckham Jr., right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, let's come over here. I'll give him like a haircut like Odell Beckham Jr. He's popular, that type. No, that's like, I'm like, huh? Why not? Why not? Odell Beckham Jr. is cool. No. Miles called it his hood. So that makes it terrible. I was like, most people probably didn't even read that comic. They probably didn't even read that comic.
I read it.
What did you think?
I didn't think it was as good. I didn't think, I didn't think it was not what I expected. And so I don't think I did a review on that one. That was definitely my hit it or miss it, It's the problem tends to be that I see I see the point that he wanted to try and do and try to make a young kid who's using the vernacular of the streets, but this is not Miles Morales, right? It's like you are putting things into his mouth and making him sound different than you would expect, right? And that I think why it
It's
missed the
not.
mark. And of course, some people called him out.
It's not Miles. It's not
It's
Miles
not.
Morales because what if? So
Yeah, I know. But you're using the character of Miles Morales in the what if. But the character of Miles Morales is still the character of Miles. It's the what if part that you're supposed to be changing, not him acting
that's fair.
and singing and rapping. That's my issue.
That's fair. That's fair.
So it's you know.
Yeah,
So
the writer came out and
I'm always
apologized.
happy to see different things. I like the concept, but it was like I just thought it wasn't as expertly done. I wish it had been done better. It had so much promise. What would you do when you have that particular type of power? Yo, I'm gonna rap, and it's not bad, but it just wasn't in the character. You're like,
I
and
don't
this
know.
goes back to what we think of the character.
I see so much of I see so much imagery of Miles Morales, doing hip hop or DJing or playing basketball or wearing the sneakers or having the hoodie on, and all of that stuff seems to be just fine. So I'm surprised that in this right here, he's like, "Hey, I got the power of Thor. Let me rock the mic." And gives like everybody's like, "No, you can't do it now." Like, okay, I didn't think. I mean, I didn't think it was like this great story. I didn't think it was. I didn't think it was offensive to the point where a writer needs to come out and apologize for it. But that's where you get these progressives coming in. You better do something. We're gonna cancel your ass. So I can totally dig. I can totally dig that. But the whole slate with against Odell Beckham Jr. I'm like, look, Odell Beckham. I was like, come on. Was that really necessary? I guess so.
I didn't take it when I read it. It just wasn't that great, and I said it wasn't. The story just could have been much better, and it just wasn't that bad. I wouldn't say it was trying to be offensive or anything. It just was not a good. That whole series is in my. I could read that in 100 years type of thing. It wasn't like, wow, I gotta read it. Okay, wow, I gotta read this again. I know some people that like Blood Hunt, but I like some of the stories. They were pretty good. I like some of the stories in Absolute Power. Some people didn't like it. It's a hit or miss, but it's also that in like Absolute Power you have I guess it was okay until they did one about her background, right? Then I was like, I didn't really care too much about that. But when they were just talking about her and her going about the dismantling the superheroes and taking the power amongst herself to do what she had to do, I thought, yo, this is pretty good. Then they did the episode of the issue with her, why she came about this, and I was like, I really don't care about this stuff at all.
Well,
so that's my take on it. So
we're closing. They're not ending the episode right now, but we're not playing any more of this. We're closing on this portion of it where they talk about. They've been mainly talking about white writers dealing with black characters, and it also kind of feels like with problems. At least I can say I had is that they're taking it and they're like saying, well, white writers and artists, they did these bad things early on. They try to do some good things. They try to add some colloquialisms into the stuff. But it's like, we're going to stay away from anything that could be positive. We're not going to utilize Captain Marvel from the Avengers and say, well, she became the leader of the Avengers for a period and say, well, that's not going to work in this thing we're doing here because it's a black character written by a white guy that made this character that he created the leader of the Avengers for a period. Captain America says, no, she should be it. They tried to give it back to Cap and like, no, Captain Marvel's been here. She's been doing very well. She should be the leader for now. So, and the thing is, the way the Avengers worked, they used to trade leadership throughout the team. And that didn't just mean the guys. There's a period where the Wasp was leading also. So the fact of them handing over leadership in the 70s, it got kind of, whoever's important, like Iron Man or Cap, but it did definitely get to the point where it went back to where you could have someone, you become Avengers in a day, like you're like the Vision in a day, Captain America the same day, and Captain Marvel, after she appeared. So that sort of thing. So I think they didn't really kind of go through and say, hey, here's white writers doing them. How many positive characters do we have? We have, the characters that help the Submariner in there. It's just sort of like they just kind of just said, let's just hop over this. Let's not try to show any other things that could be any way positive in these storylines, and or it showcase the black artists that were, doing their things. Not even like Keith Pollard, who hadn't, I don't think, I can't even think of within there in Marvel he's doing Spider-Man, uh the Thor, Fantastic Four, Green Lantern, the Vigilante, being able to do different things. So it's kind of just taking this and not referencing that they were positive characters and positive portrayals in the as the future came. It just said, hey, we had this big problem and no black writers, and now they're gonna struggle with the black writers too, and I think in this next stage. But just wanted to say that as a closer for me.
But one thing I want to make sure people understand as we listen to this is like saying that characters have to be written by black writers for a black character, or then you're gonna have to be a woman writer for a woman character. I think that is too narrow. Ideally, you would always want to try to get people in a room who could write a book or write a character, whether they're black or white. But the key thing is that they try to make this character authentic, right? We don't want to say, because basically then you're limiting the silo of whatever race you are, whatever gender you are, you can't write something else for someone else, right? And that's totally wrong. But what we are saying is that you have to have some type of sensitivities, and you have to have within the ability within your writing organization, whatever, you should give opportunities to people from other voices so they can hear this, and they shouldn't be limited. If you're a black writer, you can only read for white. You should be able to write white characters too. you know what James Patterson is extremely popular with his what the what's his name of the character,
Alex Cross.
Alex Cross. He's the black character. And I think he does a decent job with that. I think we have to be realistic on this situation. I just don't want to get to where everybody's silent. Oh well, you're not a black guy, so I don't want to listen to your thing because it sucks. Like you said, Don McGregor did a great job with Black Panther initially, right? But I think by closing out, but at the same time, you have to give opportunities for people to come out there and do. Oh well, we don't have any black writers. Well, we don't have any qualified black writers. Oh, all the British writers, all the British black writers are in England. We don't have any in America. Stuff like that. You gotta, you gotta try, and it sometimes you may take time to nurture some of them, but you can't jettison them the minute. Oh well, you only sold 10,000 comics and that's it. Sometimes it takes to bring talent about. Probably that character that you wanted to pigeonhole them in isn't right. The character to really they have the best vision. Just because he's a black guy doesn't mean he shouldn't be doing the Doctor Strange because he has that crazy psychedelic look, or he shouldn't be doing Ghost Rider. And the same hand, probably you have a white writer who's sensitive and understands a particular culture, and probably he should be the one leading the Black Panther because he gets it and understands the character, loved this character, and has read everything possible on this character. And so you're like, all right, let's see this story. This story that you've come up is different. It's imaginative, and still keeps the essence of what Black Panther is about. That's what we really need people to be doing. Am I right, guys?
Yeah.
I agree with you about 95%. The only other thing is I'm not big on the placeholding because that's more like a power move to a certain extent. When you're saying, well, look, a black character needs to be written by somebody black. Female character should have a female writer.
I didn't say that.
Huh?
No, I didn't say that.
I'm not talking about you. But when they say stuff like that, when you have people espouse that, that's just placeholding. That's like, okay, if we get a character, and this isn't voice acting, which I always thought was ridiculous. If we have a black character, then we go look for a black character. It's a voice. Anybody can do a voice at the end of the day, but this becomes like, all right, so this is going to be reserved for this group of people, this is going to be reserved for women. But then you can't, okay, so then if I'm black, I could never voice Superman. The best I can do is Cyborg or Black Lightning at the end of the day. And it should be
Yeah.
the same thing. If you are a writer should be able to say, look, I got this new book out over here. What's it called? It's all, it's called Ms. America. I'm going to put you on it. But don't you want to put a woman on it? Like, no, I want somebody who can write a good story. Do you don't think you can write a good story with a female lead? Is that impossible for you? It shouldn't be It should not be compacted to that, because once you do that, that's when the stories get bad. That's when the stories get bad, because now it becomes, all right, we have to check a box, and we have to make certain that we have this person as opposed to a good writer. And if you can imagine locales in different universes and different parts of dimensions and spells and all of these other things, it shouldn't be that big of a leap, to imagine yourself as a person of a different complexion, or even of a different sex. And if it is, I guess you don't have the stuff in order to write this. But most writers are able to do that. Been able to do that successfully for a very, very long period of time, going all the way back to William Shakespeare. So I don't understand in today's day and age why we want to compartmentalize that.
Well, I only have to correct everything outside of the VO talent, because we do have a historical thing in the Star Trek animated series where they got Kirk, they had Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and they got McCoy, and they said everyone else is going to be all the other voices are going to be done by these other two people, and they turn into the other actors are like, well, Uhura, Michelle Nichols, and Walter, who plays Sulu, they're both out of work. They're not doing anything. Like, why? So they basically went to Leonard Nimoy, and Leonard Nimoy spoke up and said, like, come on, like, who's going to play these characters? Not to say because they were just because of their race, they were the characters. So if we're hiring us, why not hire them? Because you're also using Scotty, who can do a bunch of voices also, but you're not going to have these other people who are part of the series, and they're actors. They'll take the work, and then of course, and that's how Leonard Nimoy also became. Before Shatner was the bad guy in Star Trek, Leonard Nimoy was the one, because he was the one who constantly stood up for the thing. So in voice acting, they would use the same guys all the time, and at the same time not include anyone. So you only see I think who's it Arsenio on the Ghostbusters, like he would play the black character on the Ghostbusters. So it's like a very closed in kind of thing. So I just in that case of the audio thing, just want to add that in there.
Yeah.
All right, so begin.
Okay, so I guess part one of what was the title of this?
The Black Superhero Paradox, right in the upper corner.
Yeah. It's right there. So thank you. So hey, if you like what you hear, give us a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and probably we'll do part two. Spin a rack?
Or maybe.
Yeah, you'll get to hear my voiceover work. You'll be able to hear Calvin Ellis do both Clark Kent and Superman, proving that it's not your complexion, but your character and your voice acting ability that should allow you to voice these characters.
It's not your complexion, it's your connection.
Well,
yes, definitely.
I guess I better start working the complexion then.
Ready?
Spin a rack?
We're out.
Out.